one more minute to actually start the presentation, but I think at this point we can start introducing ourselves and let you know who we are. If you attended the session yesterday, then you know my name is Tamara Hegan, and my colleagues John and Arash are with me today. We're from Spot Solutions, and we're here to sort of give you guys a sense of how to actually build your roadmap scenarios for success. So the goal here today is going to be talking through some different scenarios and explaining how those scenarios roadmaps were developed and taking a look inside the real system. Everybody has the ability to speak and interject, and throughout this we'll have an opportunity for questions and discussions around the whole thing. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is just show you, we're going to be providing everybody in the session today with a handout package. These handouts have a number of forms and tools that we use when we are working with clients or anybody else to help us understand and plan our entire situation. So this is an M365 adoption planning canvas, and it can be really good as a starting point to understanding what your organization needs. You start by identifying key stakeholders and making sure that you understand who are going to be directly impacted. So we've given an example here, including the end users who are going to be impacted by it. Then we want to identify some of the key features or key activities, I should say, that we're going to need to do in order to build our roadmap. So assessing the features, communication and engagement plans, getting the requirements. Then we want to look at the key resources. Who do we need to have as an organization to be able to complete this project? Some of these individuals may be internal to your organization, and others you may contract out to a consulting firm or someone else to help you to build and implement your M365 solution in that first phase. So make sure that you identify those resources regardless of whether they're internal or external. And what's our value proposition? What is it that we're going to get out of implementing these tools? So these are some examples: enhanced communication between teams, automation of business processes, external sharing portals for collaboration with third parties, etc. Look at your organization, your needs, and help identify what your value proposition is going to be. And what are the interactions? Is everything going to be here? How are we going to leverage this M365 implementation, and how is it going to interact with other tools and systems we already have? What kind of channels, what kind of applications are we going to use? What features do we want to deploy? So do we want to use Teams? If we do want to use Teams, are we only going to use Teams for videos and video meetings, but not for telephone calling? Do we want to use Microsoft Teams as our full phone system? These are choices that we have and we need to understand. And what are the segments of users who are going to be leveraging the tools that we're putting in place from M365 in this first phase? How are they going to use those things so that we can make sure that as we're designing and developing it, we understand what we're looking at? And then what's our cost structure? What kind of licensing do we want to do? Do we need everybody to be the same? What are the options that we have? So at the end of this session, everybody will be provided with a handout package that includes the adoption planning canvas, as well as several other forms and tools that can be used to help with your planning and to help break down and understand your requirements. So in our first scenario, we're going to look at a small local construction company. This company is primarily building single-family dwellings in gated communities. and they do a fairly substantial amount of business in terms of dollars, but their scope is relatively small and they're growing. So the first thing we look at is what's the challenges for them? What drives them to implement an M365 environment? For this particular company, they have to deal with multiple generations in the workplace. A staff that's less comfortable with using technology, they tend to be more trades or hands-on workers, and their staff is located across different project and office sites across the GVRD. So when they start looking at SharePoint, or not SharePoint, but Microsoft 365, what parts of Microsoft 365 are they most looking for? And their top three items were the ability to share documents and access files instead of having to deal with VPNs and network drives and people in the field not being able to upload or download until they got to an office. Because they have generations in their workplace that are not comfortable with technology, they need to make sure that whatever they implement initially is really simple and easy to use interface. They need people to feel like they can do this and stabilize in this new way of working. And finally, they need remote capabilities. They want their employees to be able to find information or upload information wherever they may be, from a mobile device as well as from a desktop computer. So going through the planning board, identifying the priority components in their roadmap. So the priority components are the items that will be implemented in that first year or that first phase of Microsoft 365 roadmap. So the most impactful for their organization was getting off Exchange on-prem to Exchange online so that it could be accessed anywhere, anytime, regardless of the device that you're on, and SharePoint Online for collaboration. They moved their documents through migration from their network drive into SharePoint Online sites that had full mobile capability and app-enabled experiences on a smartphone or a tablet. This allows them to stabilize, but still maintain something that's fairly comfortable for their users. Secondary components, their 2 to 5 year plan is to start to look at process automation, approvals, and notification workflows using Power Automate, leveraging the existing backbone within their SharePoint Online and Exchange Online environments, and to start doing data visualization, leveraging Power BI to show them their cycle times, their safety stats, and other information that they're storing within their SharePoint environment. So if we take a look at something like that, we can come right into a reporting center that's reporting on the statistics right within the SharePoint Online environment using Power BI. This allows a quick deep dive into any content that I want within the reportability. I can start to see different information, filter it by different values, and I can see this real time. In addition to that, this organization needed to make sure that MFA was turned on so that they would have full capability of being able to ensure that only their real employees were able to access their environment. MFA ensures that if somebody steals my password and username, they still can't get into the system because they don't have my cell phone, and so they can't put in the MFA. So for this organization, they needed to make sure that they had their operations manual, all of their policies, procedures, and forms quickly and easily available to their staff. They wanted to make sure that everybody involved would be able to get the information that they needed right away in an easy to follow spot. And they wanted to make sure that they had all of that information accessible to the team. In addition to that, they want to have project onboarding, and a dashboard that's going to eventually connect to their Power BI. But right now, just allows individuals to onboard new projects and take a look at the status of existing and ongoing projects within their group. Before we move on to scenario 2, does anybody have any questions about the scenarios? All right. So we're going to take a look at scenario 2. This is a local dredging company. They work within the harbor in Burrard Inlet and along the Fraser River, dredging and making sure that the river is passable for other marine transportation. So, what kind of challenges drove them to an online environment? The current platform that they were using to share their content was very old, buggy, and at end of support. Additional individuals within the organization. Hello, welcome. Additional individuals within the organization require ISO or ISO compliance because of the type of regulated work that they do. So they need to have a way to have ISO compliant document management, and they want to find a way to get unified messaging to all staff in all areas of their operation. And finally, they want to collaborate on documents with a single source of truth. So the critical features, what is needed most, was a roll up and push notifications of announcements and news items to all of the divisions within the organization. Controlled document creation and approval for an ISO library that can make sure that all of the ISO requirements for auditability are kept. They need reporting so that they can regularly provide updates on what they're doing and how much silt has been moved. And they need quick and easy ways to communicate between their teams. So the primary components for this particular client were Exchange Online to get email, again, access anywhere, anytime. Although many of us might have our email associated to our phone, not every organization actually issues cell phones to their staff, and not everybody wants to have their work email on their personal phone. By having Exchange Online, you can access your work email through any device, whether it be a phone, a desktop, or a laptop, that doesn't have to already be associated with your work ID. SharePoint Online for their collaboration on documents and for the news and announcements to be pushed. Data visualization on the lists that are collecting their daily data and project statuses in Power BI, and the implementation of Microsoft Teams as a meeting and chat platform, fully integrated with their Exchange email service. Getting these pieces together allowed them to build their baseline and create ISO certification and ISO documentation libraries, as well as other more collaborative features. The secondary components for this client are additional process automations and workflows as the organization begins to work within the space, mobile forms, so that different tasks can be done completely automated instead of filling out an Excel spreadsheet. We're taking that Excel spreadsheet and filling out a mobile form on the job, and that's automatically sending that information to other systems for visualization, reporting, approval, etc. And finally, security and compliance. Once the baseline has been created, we start looking at data loss prevention, sensitivity labelings, where the system will automatically identify confidential or special information within files, chats, emails, or content, and label them to prevent sharing in inappropriate ways. So these kinds of requirements and needs help us to come to a place where we start to be able to look at different kinds of examples. We can see all of our reporting, all of our information being stored in a single place. We can chat on that, share just a single piece of the information instead of having to have everything sitting within a spreadsheet. You can have all of your permitting for example, and this is one of the things that they were tracking within the environment, being able to say, when did I get my permit for each permit and when is that permit redue, and having workflows that help us to identify and notify somebody in advance that something is coming, that we have something new that we need to do and something new that we need to look at. In addition to that, you can develop things like the ops manual. In this case, this document number column requires it to be a unique value in keeping with the ISO standards. That means that every document has an absolutely unique document number that is not repeatable, that is tracked throughout the entire life of that document in terms of processes, procedures, and templates. Leveraging Microsoft Teams to allow our individuals to have conversations, plan for team activities, and move these tasks between activities simply and easily. Within this, I also have access to the files that I'm sharing through my Microsoft Teams interface. But you'll notice that in this case, I don't have the ability to actually call somebody directly through a call pad because my organization has implemented Teams for meetings and chats. So I can start a meeting and start a video call with anybody that's in my contact list, but I'm not going to be dialing out to the 1-800 number or making a appointment using MS Teams. Other individuals and organizations will will implement some of those sorts of items. So let's take a look at scenario 3. In scenario 3, we have a marketing company. They're looking to get a modern digital workspace and their employees are tech savvy. They're ready and willing to start to implement more interesting and multimedia tools. But the staff for this marketing company are geographically dispersed at several offices throughout Western Canada. They need a collaboration platform that they can collaborate on, and they also want project deliverables being delivered to their clients through some kind of a portal. Because they're a marketing firm, all of this needs to look really slick and be really easy for people to use. So their critical features are full document and image collaboration, a portal for client access, task automation and workflows to make sure that all of the items are being completed and monitored, and the ability to deliver really slick multimedia pages, both internally and externally. For this client, our priority components are Exchange Online for email. I recommend that pretty much for everyone. It really does help. SharePoint Online for their collaboration portal. Power Pages to pull information from their SharePoint Online environment and display it in a really slick and easy way to their clients without having to know the exact email of each client that might be coming to take a look at the marketing materials developed, and Microsoft Teams for video and chat meetings. Their secondary components for this client are process automation for approvals and notifications, a video channel using Microsoft Stream to display video content and share that internally and externally, and data visualization using Power BI. So when we come and take a look at our marketing space, we've got the ability to let everybody know all the different locations that the offices are in. We see the different news and announcements that are getting pulled out. And I have the ability to actually start understanding more of this material. In this example, we have a workflow set up so that if somebody submits a new RFP, they can come in and provide their RFP, put in a link to that information, decide the client, And if we say that this is a new client to us, it's going to actually cause a workflow. So when I submit this, because I've said that there's a new client, it's actually going to submit a request in several locations. First, it's going to add an entry to the client list because only clients in the client list can be put into the proposal library. So it's going to add an entry into our proposal list, and then it's going to request that that is approved and that an individual come in and fill out all of the client information about that particular item. So once that happens, this will get filled out and a development task will be created. I believe that. So here, Webinar Central has been added as a new client. I can take a look at the RFP request or go directly into that client and provide all of the client contact information. This client's now in the client list. Similarly to the client piece, I also, and for the purposes of this demonstration, everything's coming to me, but generally these would flow to different individuals, said, hey, there's been a request for development on a proposal for Webinar Central. So reviewing the request and then assign the proposed development tasks to the appropriate team member. So I can come right in from my email and I can start putting this in. Actually, we're going to say we're going to assign this one. The final due date for this is the last day of February. It's going to be a proposal. If I have any specific images, I can include those. And I'm going to assign this. In this case, I'm going to assign it to myself because I want that to come through. And now you'll notice this client here has this back and forth. This is a lookup. I can only pull in clients that are already in my client list. So now that has been assigned, that proposal development task right down here has been assigned, and I'll receive an email asking me to work through that particular task. That's one example here. Now, when we talk about Microsoft Stream, we want to have, and you'll notice that the Microsoft Stream is custom to my environment and it knows who I am. And I can actually come in here and I can look at the channels. So I have a training channel, and if I look at that training channel, I've got some training content there. I can also look at just videos that have been produced. And I can share these. So when I want to share them, I can embed them on my site, email them to somebody, or put them wherever I would like. In addition to that, I can see, do I want everyone in my company to see this video? Do I want to share it with people outside of my organization? So I have that ability to create a whole digital channel similar to what you might see in YouTube, but it's all internal to my organization. And I can also see additional files that are available. Moving into things like Power Pages and other types of tools, we can start to actually really develop complete packages of information, complete tools for everyone. So let's take a look at a couple of the apps. So again, part of what makes, oh, and here's my notification that I have been assigned this new activity. Part of what makes the Microsoft 365 environment so useful to us is that it actually is an a la carte solution. I have the option to choose whichever aspects of this tool meet the needs of my organization. So here is an example of a tracker. This tracker is used to identify people who are using harm reduction sites for safe injection items. This app allows me to take a look at all of the information about the individual. I can add a new person, so a handle or a nickname. I identify my gender. Did they visit an injection site? Yes or no? What substances were consumed? And their log in and log out. And I can save that information. And if it's required, I've got it right here. Now, I'm doing this on a computer. But this is formatted to be done on a tablet or any other kind of system or tool. I can look at creating apps. So these are all different Microsoft 365 components. So, oh, I wanted to see all my apps. So I've got my Outlook, OneDrive, all of my standard Word application, Teams, Yammer, Forms. Another great example of a component that you may find particularly useful and find an easy way to implement in your environment. Forms allows us to create quick and easy feedback tools. So you can create a form that's very simple, that from an end user's perspective on a computer would look like this. So this is a sponsorship request form for the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation. So this is created, it knows who I am, it wants to know what's the date, what's the name of my organization, which First Nation or Indigenous community do I represent, what's the contact information, and what do you want to sponsor. And then moving to the next, which it does have some required fields, gives you a little bit more. And this allows a fully mobile enabled opportunity to be able to see, as well as immersive reader. And the immersive reader is a built-in out-of-the-box accessibility feature that will allow individuals who have visual impairments to have the content of the page read to them. You also have the ability to see all of the responses to all of the information in a nice visual summary that can be exported to Excel or printed as and sync all responses to a new workbook. So you've got all of that ability in the forms. But you can take that a step further. We talked about a learning center. I also have the ability to have a quiz. So I'm going to show you coming into the health and safety site. We have this safety video, which we've embedded on the page, and safety incident tracking. Inside of incident tracking, we can actually report all of our safety incidents. I can have a quiz right beside our Safety 101. And when somebody takes the quiz, they have to provide their detailed information. When you create quizzes, you identify what the right answer is, how many points each question is worth, what pass or fail looks like. And when somebody completes it, you can actually review the answers or post scores. So who passed and who failed. So 100%, 83%, 17%. Posting these scores allows the individual to know whether or not they have succeeded or failed at the quiz. For one of our clients, we created a safety quiz process that once the response is submitted, the training team lead actually gets that response and sees the grade and says, great, this is approved, you've passed. And a workflow automatically creates a certificate of completion and sends that email to the training team as well as to the individual to say, you've passed that training course. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to actually open up the floor a little bit, and I want to talk about some of your actual scenarios, some of the things that you guys are actually potentially doing. So my question to you is, which industries are you in, and what kinds of features, what kinds of challenges are you experiencing in your own organization? All right. Quiet bunch today. So instead, I'm going to walk you through the handouts that you'll receive at the end of this session. Please feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, collaborate at any time.
And also just going to add, sorry, I'm just going to also add, you also have that Q&A. If you're not comfortable jumping in with your camera and audio, you can always drop a note and a question in our little chat section.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, pardon me. In our handouts, we want to try to help you understand the easiest, fastest, best ways for you to be able to identify all the things you need to build your roadmap. And these documents together become the roadmap. So, in the very first piece is identifying your team members. All of these different members are going to be important. So we've put in some typical ones here, department leads, communication leads, etc. You may have different roles within your roadmap, but generally these are going to be good ones. And just because it says it's a department lead doesn't necessarily mean which department. So you're going to identify that as well. So what's the responsibilities of your executive sponsor? What are they going to do in this process? Which department are they from, and which person has been identified? So typically your executive sponsor is the person who's green lighting it at the executive level. They have very high level goals and objectives, and they're not going to get in the weeds or do the work. The success owner is usually a project manager or somebody who is actively going to be working with all of the project team to make sure that the implementation is a success. Now, in a large organization, you may have a program manager that's managing a lot of the different items. In smaller organizations, you may not have a program. Champions are the individuals within your organization that are going to champion this change, that are going to be power users and really help everybody else get accustomed to it. Your training lead will make sure that they enable and empower your users to be able to use the system. Department leads are stakeholders because any change impacts them. Your IT specialists are likely to be doing much of the work, implementing and configuring your situation. Communications lead needs to take the lead in making sure that the change management is effectively communicated and managed. And then you have HR manager and community manager handling some of these other items. So then you're going to meet with your team members and host a workshop. So here's a little bit of an example of some questions to drive the conversation in your workshop. What are some of your organization's challenges or pain points with collaboration and communication? What areas in which your organization wants to improve? What are some strategic initiatives or transformation projects that can be supported by the M365 environment? So if you go, we want to be paperless, here's another thing that we can support: crossing initiatives. This isn't happening in a vacuum, and it isn't separate from all of the other types of things that you might want to be doing. So, what methods of communication and collaboration are better received than others in your organization? Some people, it's all about the emails. I want emails. Other people, I only want to have a conversation. What are those things? And taking your feedback and recording your feedback from some of those key stakeholders. Prioritizing your business scenarios. So gauging the impact. So you want to take a look at, and here another slide that you can use to create scenarios. So for example, as someone in sales management, I want to have a single version of the sales proposal that everyone has access to rather than managing multiple versions in email. Using a SharePoint site, centrally store a single version of the document. I know this will be successful when my sales team creates more proposals more easily. So this is an example of how you can set up a use case or a scenario so that you can take those documented scenarios and start putting them into a graph. Basically, when we're looking at this, we want to know for each scenario, which is low, medium, or high impact and difficulty. So I could insert a shape and give it a color and say, okay, so for first scenario, it's a medium difficulty with a low impact. And then I'm going to create a different color for a different scenario. It's a medium impact, low difficulty. And start to color code. I can even tag each of these to add an item or put a number in to say, okay, that's scenario 1, that's scenario 2, and I can start to map the scenarios that I've created with my stakeholders and project team into this impact graph. And that's going to help us determine which solutions along that roadmap are going to be tackled first, which ones have the greatest impact for the least amount of effort, and then later which ones might be more difficult but have a high impact, and continuing along that process. Earlier, we went through how to use the business model canvas, so I'm not going to redo that for you, but it's there for you to look at. So what are we going to do in terms of establishing some benchmarks? So how do we know that we're successful? It's not just to say, oh, we're successful because we have SharePoint now, or we're not successful because now we have a Power App. Success is more than implementation. Success is people using the tool that was built for them and meeting the goals that that tool was meant to address. So an example here is we want to reduce operating costs. So that's the statement, that's the benchmark, the KPI. We want to do that. So we say increased adoption correlates to reduced third-party conferencing usage, travel time, and resource allocation. So our quantitative, how do we know that that's happened, is we look at our Microsoft 365 reporting to see how it's being used. We look at our finance and accounting reports to see how much money is being spent on third-party conferencing usage. And we take a look at travel and phone expense reports to see how much money and resources is being allocated. When we compare the pre and post M365 reports, we'll actually see if there was a cost savings in this rollout. Post-rollout usage of third-party phone conferencing should show a decreased usage of 10% or more per month. So those are the goals, and that's the benchmarks and KPIs that they want to use. So you want to make sure that you're picking specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely goals, SMART goals for your KPIs, so that you can legitimately see how implementing these tools is going to impact you. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this benchmarking before we move on, because it can be a little bit deceptive. You want to set these benchmarks, and it's critically important, but you also need to recognize that there will be a lag between the implementation of a system and your entire end user base being proficient in a system. I did a lot of work in Lean Six Sigma, and I worked with an organization who were looking to reduce the cycle time on proposal development. So a very large company, and they were spending upwards of 3 to 4 weeks developing a proposal, not just for RFPs, but different proposals through their marketing and business development group. So they wanted to find a way to make that faster. So what we did first in Lean Six Sigma is we measured all of the tasks that they were doing and how long it was taking to do each task. And we determined that a certain amount of automation within a SharePoint online environment, creating boilerplates that could be leveraged, and having a workflow that helped workflow through each of the tasks was going to help to make their system much better. We built the system, and we continued to measure for 3 months the productivity. What we noticed is in the first month, productivity dropped by about 10%, and it dropped because everybody was learning how to use the new system, how to access it. Their old shortcuts weren't going to work. They had to work in a new way. So that was to be expected. At the end of our 3 months, in terms of measuring that productivity, their productivity had increased by 45% at the end of 3 months. So a total increase of 35% after they'd dropped in month 1 and gained in month 2 and 3. So we were able to increase the productivity and meet those KPI benchmarks that they wanted, but that didn't happen right away. So whenever you're implementing something new, make sure to give a little bit of time. We usually call it stabilization time for people to get used to and get comfortable with what they're doing in the new system. That's going to be critical in ensuring that you're successful. So here's a success criteria scorecard that you can use to help understand where you're at. So you've got your goals. So what's the business value of the goal? The type of value. So it is financial. Is it in efficiency? Is it in cycle times? And who's the owner of that? And then under measurements, what's the measure, the KPI measure that we're going to use here? What's the formula for understanding it? So the measure is reduced operating costs. The formula is pre and post in these reports. And the measure is 10% per month. So we can sort of put in, that's the formula. The baseline is 10% per month, or the baseline of the KPI was, say, $5,000. Our target then, if we're wanting to reduce by 10%, we put in here, and we can start seeing if we're meeting those baselines and those targets and score that over a period of months. So you might have a scorecard, and you might score your success criteria on a monthly basis for the first 6 months to see where you're at and how close to your KPIs you've gotten. You can define your KPIs right here. So KPI or measure name, reporting frequency, formula, data sources. So these are all different ways that you can leverage and define your KPIs really well so that everybody's speaking the same language and understands what success looks like to you. So we're giving you in these handouts quite a few different tools. You do not need to use them all. You don't need to choose to use every single one, but they're all here to give you, depending on what resonates with you and what works in your organization, good ideas about how you can prepare for this. So technical readiness is key to ensuring that your organization is ready to launch, that you are good to go for go live. So you've got, did we do our legal and security review? Is it completed? Yes or no? If it's not, and you might actually fill this out first with how do you complete it? How do you know it's complete? So plan to complete might be legal and security review document filed with the project team. Is that complete? Yes or no? Service capabilities, decide guest access and provisioning policies. So going through each of these are the technical back-end things that IT needs to make sure have been done before you go live. So are we making sure that we've got whitelisted URLs and IP addresses so people can access those sites? Did we decide whether we're going to allow third-party guests to come to our site? And have we provisioned the security and other items? Did we assign reporting roles? Did we any of those sorts of things? So these are example readiness items. These are primarily readiness items around Microsoft Teams implementation, but not only, and can go with different items. So you would want to sort of fill that out and identify if they're complete. Now, how many of you maybe raise your hand if you've heard of a guy named Simon Sinek? Okay. Simon Sinek is a motivational speaker and a business consultant who goes into organizations and helps them to understand how they can improve. And he has a book called Understand Your Why. So it's a really great concept. I'm actually not specifically interested in anybody buying the book. You're welcome to if you want. But that's sort of what this slide is about, this form. What is your why? Why do you want to use these tools? Why are you wanting a digital workspace? What as an organization is most important to you? So in this example, our company vision statement has always been to connect and collaborate. Now our virtual workspace will match our physical open format workspace. Content will be shared, communication will be streamlined, connections will be made. So your why as an organization should connect to the why of your employees as well, and the systems that you're using for that. So you want to know how will Microsoft 365 benefit your employees? We're going to make information more accessible at their fingertips, allow collaboration at the same time in a team environment, allow timely assignment and notification of tasks and workflow items. What are the things that you're going to be doing to help you and your organization get to your why, the why of doing the things that you want to do? So the last little bit I want to touch on is some of the learning pieces, because I think that this is really important. So we have some documents for training considerations. So we want to look at, okay, what are our current productivity tools? How technologically literate are our employees? Are they really comfortable or not comfortable? If they're not comfortable, then we want to make sure that whatever training we provide them empowers them to feel good about themselves, and that they are going to be able to do their day-to-day tasks easier and better. What are change programs? So are you already using any kinds of change um, management tools? Do you have any programs in place that you can build this into to help build people's confidence? At Spot Solutions, we use a certified change management methodology called ADKAR, which is um, awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. So you want to use whatever systems you have in place. And do you have preferences on how training is conducted? Who do you need to train? Who's going to be impacted by the implementation directly? What audiences will drive change going forward? And what kind of support organizations do you have? So in many cases for our clients, they have their own IT department and they have hypercare through Spot Solutions for a period of time where we're available. But you might have other support organizations above and beyond that are going to need to be trained. So it might be IT help desk. You might also have train the trainers. You want to have internal training team. What do they need to learn? So for the transition state and in future state. So how do we sunset the old system? How do we migrate our content? In the future state, what's the overview of the new environment? What's their role in it? What are the new processes that the implementation of these components of Microsoft 365 are going to build for us? How do they learn? So different people learn in different ways, and adult learners tend to require multiple learning methods in order to learn. So having multiple approaches, a face-to-face in-person training, a web-based training, self-based training, a user manual that somebody can read or print, as well as videos in small bite-sized chunks. All these things are going to make a huge difference in how the end users are ultimately impacted by the training. And then what content would be helpful for your training plan? Just list content, put some hyperlinks together, and that's going to help you develop that training plan. Finally, we have the Champions Network. So those people who are early adopters who want to be involved, who are excited by new technology. This is a little checklist for creating a Champions Network within your own organization and ensuring that you have that very first frontline guy embedded in your operations. So we have about 4 minutes left. So thank you all for attending this webinar. I'd like to just open up one last time to see if anybody has any questions or comments that they would like to share. All right, well, John, I'll pass that over to you for the end of the session, but thank you guys, everyone, for all of your time.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone taking the time to come and join us. If you have any questions that you think of after the session, please feel to reach out to us. Happy to help out in any way we can, as well as we're going to be doing a few more sessions coming up over a few more months. So stay tuned and stay connected with Spot Solutions. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it was a lot of information, so there's need to process this information.